Well, recently we did a quick tip on the sea. It was a sea study, and this person, after watching that one, asked, um, "Will you give an explanation on the shoreline and the foam next?" So that's what we'll try in this one. You probably have heard go general to specific. Do you know what that means? I know we keep saying it. We people who attempt to teach painting keep saying go general to specific, but it really helps, I think, to know what we're talking about. First of all, we try to look at a scene like any scene, not just the edge of a seashore. We try to look at any scene, and first of all, the general means things like check for the pattern. What kind of pattern? And I'm talking about kind of a movement pattern, how things divide up, how the shapes, how the space divide. So you have to completely take your consciousness away from what it is and look at what's causing it to appear to you the way it does. There's where most people get hung up and they spin their tires. They're trying to make it look like the thing that they're thinking about, and that hardly ever works. So, what are we looking for? Well, first of all, look for pattern. Now, as the sea or the ocean is coming in, and when we have foam, lots and lots of foam, and of course, it comes in all different ways, depending on lots of things, depending on the weather, depending on the time of day. You see it differently, and where the location is, all those kinds of things. But generally, if you just look for pattern, everything has pattern. And look, then what do you mean by pattern? Well, part of pattern is how the shapes divide up in the largest way. And you can see here that there's a vertical division right there, an edge right there, the way the foam is. There are probably some rocks, and I know what's causing it. That's not it. You don't have to know what's causing it. You know how to see it. But we see a division right there. We see another division right there. And we see a horizontal division right here and here. So if you just look at that, that's called directional movement. When you have a direction created by an edge, and we look for the larger edges first. So if we were doing the whole thing, we would see a different direction here, a counter direction. We're not doing that. We're just observing foam, and as the sea moves into the sand, or in this case it's sand. So look at the pattern. Now the overall pattern, and it doesn't hurt to make a few little indications on your canvas about that pattern. So if you use in oil that I'm using here, if you use a little bit of solvent in your brush and just get it dissolved, just going just to the edge, a little edge of some, I like the transparent paint for this, and then you can indicate that pattern. So we have this pattern here that have that movements going like that, and then we have another one that seems to be coming in a little bit like this, and I'm averaging it out, and that's what I mean by general to specific. This one comes in and does something like that. Then we have a counter, one that's coming in here, and we see some joining there. And then we have some layers there. Now it's those layers that we have, and I'm just going to be looking right here in this area. It's those layers that we have that causes it to appear, one thing that causes us to appear as the difference between where the sand is, where the foam begins, the edge of the foam begins, and then where it begins to kind of boil up and become big foams. So that's the first thing. So then we come down here this way, that edge there, or that pattern there, and then look specifically at the edge of where the water meets the sand in this case. And so this specifically, just make a little indication as you're moving out, and you see that comes down, and then it goes back, goes back about right here, and then comes out again about like that. And then, of course, we'd call this the edge right there, perhaps. So there's the first thing. If you get sort of a very general placement of the major divisions, the major shape divisions, that's your first step. Now, the second step is, again, look at it generally. Squint your eyes. And when you squint your eyes, you'll get something like this. So squinting your eyes takes the detail away so that you can see what it's made of. And when you squint, you'll see then begin to see value differences. So we would first of all put a very general shape, very general layers of paint there, just to show just where how the values are placed. Now, generally, I like to start with shadow, but since we're just going to be dealing with a small place, and these quick tips don't provide, they're not designed to do a full painting of a complete scene, just to show you single tips that you can practice and then go forward with your own painting. So she wants specifically to know how to observe foam and as the water meets the edge there. So I have here two colors. This one I have as a blue slightly leaning towards green. And that is what I would use if I were to do a painting of this particular scene. The printer printed this more towards red-violet there instead of more towards what we know is to be sand color. So I want to go with what I'm seeing instead of what I know. I think it's always a good idea. And if your reference is screwy, well, go with the screwy reference or take a new one. Or go on the location, which is a better idea. But anyway, aside from that, so I've done, now, if you don't have the tube colors you want, you mix them. And what I like to do is I like to mix my colors, or I like to mix the darkest version of the color I'm going to be using. I mix it on an alternate palette, and then I put it onto this palette to work from. And so a lot of times you want to start out with something a little bit different than you have already in your standard palette. So that's what I've done here. I added just a little bit of Viridian to ultramarine blue. That gave me that blue that leans slightly towards green that we have up there. And I've done a similar thing here because what I'm observing here is a desaturated red-violet. And Alizarin Crimson is a little too red for that. So I took my red-violet, which is quinacridone violet, and I added just a little bit of the red-orange to that. And that gave me a desaturated. You see how that works? I'm going to show you right here on the color wheel. This is quinacridone violet. I'm using quinacridone violet there for my red-violet. For my red-orange, I'm using transparent oxide red. So if I mix those together, just mix a little bit of this one into this one, then you see the red, the yellow that's in the orange, and the violet over here they desaturate each other, and that gives me a desaturated red-violet. If I mix the violet into the red, or red-orange, then it would lean in that direction. So you have a wonderful arsenal for mixing the colors you need. All you need to do is know how the color wheel works. Okay, the next thing is I want to locate the values. Now, here, very, very generally what we see. So, and I'm going to do that this time. This would be a block-in step, what I call block-in. So I'm just going to go here to the edge of this red-violet mixture. I'm going to pull just a little bit more of that blue into it here, there. And what I want to do there is I just want to indicate very roughly in a darker version than I'm seeing here. I want to indicate very roughly where that edge is between the sand and the sea, and then where the beginning of the sand would be. Now, I'm using a scrubbing motion here on purpose because I want that to go on very thin. I don't want that to be thick. So when you're doing things like where in seascapes you've got layers and layers and layers of things happening visually. So if you've got layers of things happening visually, then it's better to start very thin. In this case, I had just a tiny bit of solvent, but I don't want solvent in the brush for the next layers. Now, also, I'm seeing some of that pop up back in here. If I squint, I see that's right there. That goes back a little bit further than what the viewer asked for, but I'm going to go ahead and just show you the process. So what I would do there in this step is I would block in, and this time it's with scrubbing. I'll block in those general values. And so now I'm going to move a little bit more into the blue at that not very dark, at a about what I think of a shallow shadow. Get that blue mixed just a little bit with the violet there. I'm thinking about that as sort of shallow shadow. And then I want to scrub that in at a pattern that I'm seeing right there. And you see what I'm doing? I'm just adding that dark that I see right there and just placing it. And this now is where I'm going to start getting a little bit shorter, getting the area I'm working a little bit shorter. But this is the process. I mean, this is one process. This is a process that I know that works. So what you would do then is have your block in to indicate those shadow patterns. And so we have the shadow pattern up here like this. And so I'll just scrub in just enough of that to give me that shadow pattern. Now, normally what I would do in other subjects that wouldn't require quite the maneuvering that this requires, I would block in with a thicker paint. So you judge the amount of paint you're going to need for block in by what you're doing. Of course, then this deeper shadow would come about right in here, right at this edge right here. And so that's how that would go, and just continue until get those shadows blocked in. Then, this is where the real observation comes in. Then we begin to develop those patterns. Now here, we begin to go into the lighter colors, and we begin to develop those patterns that we're seeing and building it gradually. And so I will begin to build like this and just give this blue, I'm going to give this blue a middle value, and I'm shaping it in the just shadow areas there. And I see that some of the shadow areas come right here. We got that light coming over in here. We've got those shadow areas coming right in here. Now, at this point, I'm going to start getting a little closer to this. Okay. Now, and then we have that, okay, I'm just going to work right in here. Now, she was asking about foam. Look at the value of the foam and look at what it's doing. Now that's when I'm going to pull some white out over here. And at this point, I'm going to go to another brush. All right, now, so I'm going to load the brush with white. And then I'm going to pull a little bit of this greenish blue into that. And we'll begin to work those patterns that we see. And so starting about right in here, I begin to work that pattern of light. See that pattern of light? And I'll just work that brush on its corner like this, and I move it in the pattern of that light area I see. So just move it in the pattern, just like that. And I'm going to truncate myself, because if I make this too long, then you will have forgotten what I did in the beginning by the time we get to the end. All right, so then now I'm also going to go to the beach. What we need down here is just not very much variation, depending on how the light is varying it. So let's see what we have there. Now this is something else I will do if I'm out in plain air. I'll put paint on brush and I compare it with what I'm looking at. And here I put this paint on the brush, and I'm seeing I've got this. I'm in the same value area. I'm going to get that just a little bit bluer. And I'm going to add it right in here where that sand area would be. Now I know it's quirky being red violet. But that's what we're looking at. I'm going to push it right up to the blue, right up there against those edges, just like that. And then we're going to have a little bit of that blue reflecting back on top of it. And way we're going to do that is we'll go with the same value, a little bit lighter, and then we're just going to give it a little bit of scumble, just like this. On the same value. It's important that this part of it is the same value so that you can get that kind of wet feeling that the sand often has right in there, just like that. So that begins to feel a little bit wet. Let's get just a little bit more blue there now and hit it right up in the edge. So here's where we're going to create. We're going to create this particular edge between the splash. Okay, I didn't create the splash. All right, that's all right. We're going to create that edge right in here. All right, now what I want to do right here at this part is I want to load up with a little bit more of that white. You see I'm easing into it. And we see right here, we can see some of that sand through that white. So what I'll do first of all is I'll simply scumble, means that your brush is flat and the paint goes on top. So that's about how I'm going to do this. I'm just going to give a downward stroke to that. In fact, I see a little bit of movement right there. Let's get just a little bit more of that white and just mix this a little bit more and just ease that up into that edge so that you get a little bit more of see, I'm seeing a little bit of light and reflecting there where that shadow of the water comes in. So let's get just a little bit of that light reflecting where the water comes in. And then I'm seeing as that flows a little bit more of that blue, and I'm going to make that just a little bit thicker right there at that particular part of where the foam begins to flatten out. Just let a little bit of that blue and white kind of scumble on top of that. And I'm going to kind of move the brush just a little bit and try to mimic this little movement I see right there. A lot of what happens with brush and paint, regardless of what medium that you're painting in, a lot of what happens is you're mimicking the visual movement of whatever you're trying to work with or whatever you're trying to communicate. Now you can see how you can show where you have sand coming through the foam as it's coming into the beach. This is how you can show that, where you lay the color of the sand down first and then scumble on top of that. And so the scumble means, as I said earlier, you're simply loading the flat side of the brush, and the amount of paint you put on it depends on how much you're going to need there, of course. Now the next thing is we have two things going on here. Oh, I haven't left enough space down in the show. One thing is we have a dark edge. We have a dark edge underneath a light edge. That's the kind of observation that you can see better if you're on the sea rather than looking at a photograph. So describe to yourself what you're seeing and then create it. So if you just say foam or whatever you would call this, bubbling up, foam, whatever, that doesn't tell you anything. But if you say, I see a dark edge, a dark thin edge, and a light on top, then what we do, we can go and create one. And how dark does it need to be? That's the next question. Not as dark as the darkest dark, but it's about this dark right here. I'm going to give just a little bit of a violet to that and create a nice little flat dark. Now I'm going to pull the brush and have a chisel edge on the brush like that. And then I'm going to touch just that edge, touch the brush into just that edge. I don't think you can see that. I'm going to brace my hand here now My goal is to create that dark edge that I'm seeing right in there. Right in there. And I'll just barely touch it. It may be, I may have made just a little bit dark, but that's the idea. Now I'm going to create, what do I see above the edge? I'm seeing a little bit darker above that edge, so I'm going to scribe that to myself. And here I begin to put that in right in here. Oh, didn't have quite enough paint on the brush. I'll put that right in here. I really need to work that up, and you're not going to be able to see this because I need to make it, there we go. I needed an upward stroke for that, and now we're just going to get that blended. And the visual word for, the painting word for blending is gradating. Or you see how that begins to gradate, and now we need, and as far as that splash is concerned, is that really strong light on top. So this is a tiny little area here, but what I'm trying to show you is how you can approach all of that with the same approach, but the process of procedure will work the same. The only difference would be the shape and the size of it, and the direction. Shape, size, and direction. 3 of our visual elements. So I want that as white as I can get it, because I'm going to mix it right in here, right on top, where that's splashing right up there. There we go, right here. Splash on the top. So I'll just splash it. I'll let my brush splash. And it's blending down, so I'll let my brush blend down. And let's see. All right. You can see now how that's beginning to happen. Now, we continue to build what people call details. At this point, we assume if the whole thing were done, we'd done all the sand, we did all, and we've come this far with all these patterns that we're seeing in the waves, in the rolling, in the foam, and all that kind of stuff. If you start, you do all that first. You get that general stuff in there first, and gradually build details. And so just how detailed you want it to be is up to you. But if you hold off on your lightest lights until the very end, and when you finally reach the point where you are ready to put your lightest lights in, you can do little things like this little, let's see if I can pull that off, that little dribble that's coming up through here. You can find those little light areas. Those are areas where you see that light reflecting the strongest. There's a little spot right over here where the light's reflecting the strongest. Let's give it up a little bit like that. And let's see where else. So I hope by now, well, let's see, let's give this splash a little bit of light. Just picking it up right there. Just hit it with the tip of the brush just a little bit. So they're all kind of, the brush has several parts that can do work for you. It's not just a paint applicator. You don't just use it just to sling paint on, let paint build up in it and be all gunky and everything and then have no control. But you use the brush according to what it can do. So it can do things with its tip, it can apply paint on, and it can create a directional movement in the paint. It can do things with its belly, like scumble, or you build layers of paint with a scumble. And it can do things with its edge, with its tip, both the full tip here and then the corner of the tip there. So I hope maybe I've done enough right in here to give you the idea of how you would go about doing that. I think that's what the person asked for. So play with that and see what you think. Be sure to view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianneMize.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.